Hey, it's Diana and Susanna, your favorite global health scientists.
And you're listening to Global Caveat.
Today, we're going to talk about ethical and accessible food systems, sustainability, and how we can make an impact as individuals and as a community.
But before we get started, we want to thank all our supporters who make Global Caveat possible. We appreciate your shares, your money, your subscriptions, and your reviews. You can become a contagion by signing up as a patron for as little as $1 a month.
And this season, we have new content on Patreon. We will be posting 2 Q&A sessions every month, one with us, your favorite scientists, and one with different guests we've had on the show. If you have any burning questions, requests, or things you'd like to ask with the privacy of anonymity, this is for you.
Okay, let's dive right in. On today's episode, we'll be talking with Christian Tandazo, an artist and graduate student in environmental policy and sustainability management. Hi, Christian. Thanks so much for being here. Can you give us a short introduction about yourself and where people can reach you?
Hi, Susanna. Hi, Diana. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Christian Tandazo. I am originally from Ecuador. I have indigenous ancestry to the southern Ecuadorian Andes. I come from a lineage of small-scale peasant farmers and a lineage of artists which currently are present in my work. And I am currently a graduate student at the Milano School for Environmental Public and Policy and the Environment. And my program is in environmental policy and sustainability management. My background is as an artist. Went to school for ceramics and sculpture, which is really different from entering environmental policy, which is was a total shift from fields. The reason why I did it was because there was a strong passion for me to do something more apart from just, going to your a protest or something. And it's just I felt like I needed to do something more. So I've been in grad school since. My career prospects have changed dramatically. I know that being an artist is something that I'm always going to be, but right now I'm looking into more of the entrepreneurship road and how we can use and harness the power of entrepreneurship towards building alternative economic models that counter hegemonic capitalist models of production in order for us to really have a healthy, sustainable society that, because I feel right now it's not being done properly. So I'm just trying to put my foot in there, and it's just a brand new field that I'm entering. It's really exciting. I've been lucky and privileged enough to be in the school, which has really provided the access to all the things that I'm about to share with you today. And it's been great. I'm happy where I am. I feel like I am in my aligned path, my purpose, and It feels right.
Awesome.
You can reach me out through Instagram, I would say mostly, De La Tierra Soy. And you can just DM me and find me through there.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
That's an interesting career trajectory. Super art focused, and then all the way over to, I'm going to say environmental policy / sustainability / entrepreneurship.
It's been a shift, tiring, and it's been something because I was out of school for 2 years, and so I wasn't doing any schoolwork related. And when I started grad school, it was just a shock back. It's just oh my god, I'm back, and it's something completely that I have no idea what I'm doing. But the program itself has been so catering to our needs as students in a way that it has really provided the foundations for us to really take on and be professionals in this field and good practitioners. What we mostly need.
Yeah. I don't think any of us really know what's going on in grad school or out of grad school or in any school, so it's fair.
No. That was me at the beginning too, because I was because originally I wanted to do something related to like consumerism and dealing with climate change. But like as like my courses have progressed, I've been leaning towards like food systems, entrepreneurship, decolonization theory, dismantling the system.
Was there like a specific course or event that led you to focus on food systems and sustainability, or was it just like a gradual progression of things? Like what led you there?
There was this one course, and I actually like I always recommend it to every person that's in my program. Like, you have to take this class. It was global environmental policy, and the way that the class was broken down, it was broken down in like different sectors of the environment and how the geopolitical aspects of each of those work in the local, national, international spectrum. And it was just like a very like mind-blowing experience to me, because I can't see life the same way anymore because of that class.
That's amazing.
It's just like one of those classes that shakes you. I mean, I feel like some people weren't shook enough, but like you were shaken to some point, like your mindset like shifted. And for me, like I learned a lot about food in there, and I've personally been drawn to food. It's just like unconsciously in a way. I come from a lineage of small-scale farmers in the Andes Mountains. So food has always been like, and agriculture has always like been present in my life. I just never really like went for it. And now I'm in grad school, and like I tell my mom, she's like, oh, like I'm studying food. And like all of these methodologies that like that are supposedly better practices for the environment and farming. And my mom and my dad both do those practices when they were little in Ecuador. So it's just been like full circle into like just where my roots are coming from and how I'm here. But that class really shook me, and I was just like I need to,
I'm
I need
shook.
to do something
I need
more.
to do something about this.
Yeah.
He's literally shaking.
It was such like, it's been a depressing, I would say like a very depressing program. Like everything you learn is like how effed up the world is, and like all the problems that are happening, and they're like, what are the solutions? Like, oh, there are like a few, but it's just like, but we like there's so little right now. But the solutions are there. The solutions exist. And I think that's the one thing that I'm trying to hold on to. It's just like the solutions exist. Like things are possible, to really like be able to keep on doing this work and learning more about the intricateness of all of that. And its relationship to health, which is so interconnected.
Yeah, I think it's funny that you say your mindset shifts and then you see everything in systems. Like the other day I was talking to Diana and I was like, how do we stop our brains from seeing everything in a systems-based way? And she just sends me that emoji that's like, the shrug, like, I don't know.
I have no idea.
I think shaking your mindset would be one of those things, just like experiencing something that like you just can't believe that this is happening. And also like experiencing that firsthand also probably gives you like the kind of like mindset to just be like, I just can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a privilege to be able to like say like I want to like drift away from this current conditioning that we've been giving, because I wouldn't have been able to know this if I wouldn't have had access to grad school.
Yeah.
And without access to education, I think a lot of folks, they really can't start thinking like this is wrong, because nobody's telling them this is wrong. And there's no really like push to really educate the public on the alternatives that are available for us to really practice. So I think it's part of that, and just being exposed to like this kind of topics and reading about them. I feel like we had to, like since it was a class, I had to like do homework, I had to do the readings, I had to write the papers, and just doing all of that work really just like makes you like learn of like the details of how everything is working. I do think though that in order for everybody to have like maybe some sort of like mindset shift would be to look at how things are affecting you directly and how that relates to how the system works overall, because it's so interconnected.
Okay. In regards to like food systems in general, for people that don't know, haven't taken a class, haven't been exposed or anything, or maybe they have been and they weren't paying attention and they weren't as shook as you. What does it mean to have a healthy and ethical food system? Like, what is that?
To me, that means food sovereignty. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the food sovereignty movement or what it entails, but I would share it's a counter-hegemonic movement to the current industrial agricultural complex that we have. It's very anti-colonial rooted, and it basically entails that food is a human right, that people have the right to produce and maintain and trade their food locally under their own rules and jurisdictions. Producing food that is healthy, it's culturally appropriate, meaning that it's culturally appropriate to the people of like place-based communities that are from different cultures, that like the food that's being produced is appropriate for them, and that there is a community aspect of food production from the moment that the seed is being planted to the moment that the food gets to the table. So it's like a counter-hegemonic structure to capitalism and like capitalist industrial agriculture, which is what is causing a lot of the food and health issues that we have right now. So like that's what a food system looks to me like, that one that is based on food sovereignty. There's pillars to food sovereignty too, and they all have to do with what I've mentioned: localizing food systems, putting control locally and local farmers, valuing local farmers. And then, for example, if we were to implement a food system, a food sovereignty foundation within the states, that it means that immigrant farm workers in California or in the South, that they have autonomy and rights in producing their food. They're giving proper treatment when they're producing. They're not exposed to all these chemicals that they're being exposed to. And also ensuring that low wealth communities, particularly Black, Brown, Indigenous communities, have access to food, because this is something else that has been perpetuated through colonialism, and which is the disenfranchisement of being connected to the land for Indigenous peoples, for Black people, for Brown people. So there's been like this sort of like misconnection. Like we, like as POCs and Black and Indigenous folks, we have to the land. It's inherited, but we've sort of been disconnected from that because of industrial agriculture.
I think there's like so many layers to what you just said, right? Because I feel that everyone or most people can agree that you have a right to food.
Yeah.
Like everyone should eat. And it's kind of this idea of you have the right to health. Like I think most people, 99.99% of the population around the world would say, yeah, everyone has a right to be healthy. But what does that mean? And then we start breaking it down. We're like, well, what does it look like in terms of access? Like some people have more access to hospitals than others, more access to good hospitals than others.
Yeah.
So it seems like that's the same idea with
Exactly.
food systems. Is it's not just about sending a huge plane full of peanuts or I don't know, just flour to a community and saying, here, you have food now. It's about, I remember some of the components you just said is, is it culturally appropriate? Like, are these the things that they're familiar with to cook with? Do they have the right to grow their own food and sell their own food the way that they want to? Yeah.
Right. And I think that's like, it's so related to what you mentioned as to health, like access to food, because there's a lot of claim that says that food security is having like access to healthy, nutritious food. And there's been a lot of claims from like, folks. Let's say that food security is a problem. It has to do with that there's no food for people to eat, which is completely bonkers, because right now we produce enough food to feed, I think, like over twice the population of the earth. But the problem is that the food itself is just not being distributed equally. It's being distributed in a way that's very uneven, and it focuses on global north markets. So looking at food security, it's very intricate, because you have to look at it from the local, national, and international level, and who the actors are behind all of these schemes to not provide access to, things that, like you said, like things that should be, everybody have a right to it.
So you had mentioned something about local farmers and even farmers in the United States and how they're treated.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on who you are, meaning like what your background is, whether it's racial, socioeconomic, what are the differences in how they experience the overall food system?
Well, unfortunately, the experiences do vary based on all of the factors that you mentioned. It's actually, those are the factors that determine your food access. For example, if we break it down by demographics, like racial demographics, white folks and folks that are more affluent economically, have access to nutritious food, have access to local farmers, they have access to Whole Foods or like all of these like capitalist food supermarkets that are in like these highly more affluent communities, and they're purposely put in these places because those people can't afford those things. But then when it comes to, and then you're looking at low wealth communities, for example, there's a lot of food deserts in low wealth communities. Food deserts, there's I think like one grocery store per like 10 miles or something along that lines. But it's a problem, and it's a growing problem, and especially in low wealth communities, not just here in I would say like in Jersey and New York, but also like all over the country. And those people that live in in these food deserts, they don't have access to healthy food. They only have access to like fast food like McDonald's or Taco Bell and all of these different franchises that don't provide nutritious food. They provide foods that are usually fatty, and then they're not produced well. So those folks, they don't have access to a healthy, nutritious food. And then if you're looking into the racial disparities of it all, currently indigenous peoples who have been like the caretakers of land especially here in the States for so long, they're the ones that suffer from most for insecurity amongst all of the demographics. And it's really like, I, as being someone from indigenous descent, but like come from the southern part of the continent, it's really frustrating to me that I have this privilege in a way of having access to food, but then like the people from the land don't. Like the original caretakers of this place that I'm currently like standing on, they don't have access to it. Yeah. So it really is heartening to like know that. And also like that's just looking at here, like the US, but if we're looking at the global lens of how food is produced, so industrial food agriculture only produces 30% of our food, and the rest, the 70%, is produced by small-scale indigenous and peasant farmers. So these people are the ones that are producing most of our food. And because of international bodies and governments and policies that have been put in place through the market, these people don't have access to the food. So like they can't eat their own food they produce because the produce already has an owner, which is in the global north.
I've heard of folks who've gone to an African country and they're like, wow, there's so much food that the farmers are growing. I don't understand why they're all starving.
Well, it's because that food's not going to them.
I'm like, yeah, because they have to grow the food, but they can't eat the food, right?
No, because there's like legal precedents put in place. For example, intellectual property rights by like the Monsanto. Monsanto doesn't exist anymore. They merged with Bayer, so now it's Bayer, which is like really bad. So those agribusinesses, they've put like policies in place. So like, for example, if somebody wants to produce a seed of corn that they own, they can't do that. And if they do that, they will surely be sued and go to jail or something. So like, there's like these limitations. And then these agribusinesses, they're selling the seeds to grow food to farmers at such high rates, and they're not making it accessible for farmers to have food. So that's why seed sovereignty is really important as well, to ensure that we have a really ethical food system, because we need to ensure that our seed banks are being preserved and they're not being like adjusted chemically or any sort of things like that. Yeah, no, right? Yeah.
Like, I have no words.
Who
let Bayer and Monsanto be one entity? Like, that's
rich.
It happened in 20s. Yeah, there you go. I wish you guys could have seen their faces. They were like, it just like blank. And you're like, oh my God.
So we're up against pretty powerful system that has their, I don't know, it's kind of like a
monopoly.
Really, yeah, very deep roots in almost every level of the system, right? Down to the local farmers, all the way up to industry. So I guess my question is, so then you as an individual, you're hoping to dismantle some of this,
right?
Is what I'm getting. Dismantle, decolonize. How?
Girl, let me tell you. It's really, it is a big issue. I feel like it's such a systematic problem. However, I think like through meeting like the people that I've met in my program, there's been a little glimmer of hope. The way to do this, start practicing an alternative like agricultural model, is to support and uplift the voices of the people that are already doing it. Because right now there's already so many like food sovereignty initiatives all over the world, with many organizations really taking foot into like creating these small scale food systems in which you're including all of these things that food sovereignty entails. And I personally, I think as a person with privilege of being in academia and like knowing all of these things, it's to really continue to uplift those voices, and through finding a way to like help them, like assist them in one way or another, which is why I'm going into like sort of entrepreneurial way, because I want to develop ways to support these local economies by the local economies, that it's not supported from like any outside system, but it's just rooted within the growth of that economy.
Yeah, sure.
But we don't have those models, right? I mean, we do have like the initiatives to like do this at like a small scale, but not to the scale that needs to be done systematically. So in order to do that, you need to like kind of start horizontally scaling and like practicing degrowth, which are like these two new economic terminology that are coming into the narrative that a lot of economists are very against, but they're going to be against anything that's not capitalism. And so that's how I've been thinking of like how I can do my part into ensuring that we have more of these systems. I've also been thinking of how I can do that in my own community, because I know that food sovereignty, like there's so many examples of like different communities that have created these like systems. And I live in a low wealth community in Jersey, majority African American and Latinx. So and we were like deemed like one of the worst towns to live in Jersey. So it's like me knowing this, I feel like I'm in such a place of privilege. So I've been looking into like how I can get myself involved in my own town, and like how I can really like get a sense of food justice and food sovereignty for the people that are here. I mean, like even here we have such a huge Ecuadorian community. I'm Ecuadorian, and a Haitian community, and most of these folks come from agricultural backgrounds. So it's I don't know, it's like such an interesting community that I really want to like assist again, like provide all of these like all this knowledge that I have, and like see how like, you know, like not go into things like, hey, this is what you need to do. It's just like, these are the options, which one do you want to do, and I'm gonna help you. So that's how I've personally been thinking about it. However, I do think that although individual actions are really important to addressing these issues in the food system, also collective action is a lot more powerful, I would say, like pressuring our elected officials into stopping the subsidies for agribusiness, into focusing on redirecting fundings to local economies. And I think that pressure really works when it's very well organized and there's a lot of passion behind it. And I think it's a combination of the both, honestly.
Yeah.
There's not one right answer, I think.
So if any of our listeners have some extra cash lying around and care about food and, you know, uplifting communities, donate to Christian over here. And
oh, thank you. But
he could change up some food systems starting at the local level. Yeah.
And also look into donating to, like, I can actually provide you guys with a list later, like after, of like organizations that are really doing the work in the ground that would really need this like funding, because they do need this funding. And I think as part of being in this platform, I really want to be able to bring those voices up in here, you know?
Right.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about veganism, because I really want to talk about that.
Veganism.
So in our email, you talked about how you used to be vegan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then you realized there were some issues with it, so then you are now plant-based.
Plant-based, yes.
Okay, so lots of questions.
Yeah.
Just Diana and I in general have.
Please give them.
But I'm gonna
ready.
let Diana start off the vegan section.
Okay. First of all, what is veganism versus like what vegetarianism is, and then also what is a plant-based diet? Because I think a lot of people don't know the differentiation between them and like where the lines are.
Right. So let's start with vegetarian. So vegetarian is your diet is like mainly vegetables, but you still eat like, I don't know, like eggs or milk or other dairy products like cheese and pizza. So that's why vegetarians eat pizza, because they still eat cheese. I still eat honey, like all of these like small dairy-like products. Veganism, it's the complete extreme, as to which you have no animal products in your diet, and it's 100% plants. So all of your nutrients and your food is gonna be based from plants. Okay. Plant-based is kind of like a mix of the both. So plant-based is where majority, for example, 90% of your food intake comes from plants, and 10% comes from, I don't know, like eggs, honey, milk, different like little things. You can even eat fish. Like there's no restriction as to like what kind of animal product you can eat under a plant-based diet. It's just that it's not as big of it doesn't make a big part of your diet. It's like 10 to 20%. That's how I've been trying to constrain it, to like keeping it to like 10 to 20%. But most like my diet is plants. I eat plants every day.
So I guess I'm kind of like plant-based.
Yeah, like I would say plant-based will definitely be, but you're conscious of how much you're eating though. Like I feel like with plant-based, for example, I started being plant-based, I think 2 years ago or a year ago. I was traveling in Ecuador and I was strict vegan, and then all of these foods like that we have in Ecuador are like very like animal-based. So for example, I went to a beach town, and I love seafood in Ecuador, like especially being raised there, and I know a lot of vegans are gonna come at me for this, but when I was in Ecuador, I was in a beach town, and they were like they like have like a little hut, and then like you sit in it, and then they bring you the menu of what you want to eat, and then basically you order whatever you want. It's all seafood, and the guy goes in the boat, gets the fish from the ocean, and gets it for you.
All super fresh.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I was like, and then that's when I realized that, because in my education, I've learned that fishers still provide a heavy input of like protein from fish, and fish farmers too. So like there's a difference between industrial fishing and local fishing, which is fishing through traditional ways of like ancestral ways of fishing without using basically technology to fish. And that's the type of fishing that we have to support, because it supports local communities, and it's based on ancestral millennial ways of just working with nature and not against it. And at that moment I was like, I'm gonna eat fish here, because first of all I miss the taste of it, and it's being sourced so sustainably. Like the sourcing that it, like the for me to have witnessed all of that, like I can eat this, Yeah. But when it came to like not knowing where that fish came from, I was just like, I'm not gonna eat it, because like I'm just like I don't trust it. Yeah. So that's how I've been basing most of my consumption. But I would say though, I only eat fish in Ecuador. And I restrict myself to, depends on like whatever I go. It's just like if I'm open to something, like if one day it's just like, oh, like we have cookies, but they're not vegan, they're like they have milk in them, blah blah blah. It's just like, it's okay, I'll eat them, like I'm not gonna like restrict myself. Although the reason why I did became vegan was for health reasons, it wasn't for anything else. So my stomach at some point I couldn't eat, so like not even drink water. And so like I'm slowly, gradually like introducing new foods into my stomach as well, and introducing like animal products have been like very slowly done. Like I don't eat it. It's not like I eat it like all the time, but like I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not.
I think that's super important to note that some people are picking certain types of diets for environmental reasons, sustainable reasons, but also that there are people that have dietary restrictions or trying to change the way that their body's functioning in a certain way. So you don't have to just be like one or the other strictly. Like you can be all encompassing, right? Like no, there's no judgment on anyone's diet choice because maybe you're celiac, maybe you have like some kind of lactose intolerant. You can be all over the place. I just want to throw that out there before we continue talking more about diet stuff.
Preach it.
Yeah.
That's you're so right. Absolutely absolutely. I feel like that is such like a part of like why a lot of folks go vegan. It's just like for the health reasons, but then again, going vegan for health reasons, it's only accessible to certain people, you know, like not everybody can go vegan and like go buy organic food and go buy locally sourced food so you're healthy. That's not accessible for everyone. I'm grateful to have had the privilege of being able to access all these foods. Otherwise, I don't think I would have been able to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's plant-based. That's why I practice it. I also started practicing plant-based because veganism, like the extreme, I don't know if it's extreme or just like, I guess, real veganism entails that you don't wear any animal products, either like your makeup or your clothes. Like they all have to be cruelty-free. And I wasn't doing that because I was wearing leather belts. I still wear leather belts and leather shoes. So, and a lot of people were critiquing me for that. So I felt like I was being attacked for not really like being what vegan is. And so I didn't want to attach to that identity to not have to deal with that. And also I found it to be very problematic with veganism because it's a lot of people will definitely, we can agree or disagree or debate on this, but a lot of folks have veganism has become so elitist, has become so exclusive to white folks, particularly in Europe. And I think a lot of this veganism movement has been grounding on liberation of animals, which I'm all for it, you know? And the liberation from these animals, and I think that like there's something that's really important to say, is that they want liberation of animals from industrial agriculture, which is really bad. You know, industrial agriculture is one of the leading sources of greenhouse gas emissions. I totally am for that. But then they're also saying like nobody should eat animals. Like not even people that have been eating animals for millennia, not even people that have included animals as part of their traditional practices for so long, that have been eating animals sustainably for so long, without having like a major impact on the environment. Because if you think about it, cows have been here for so long. Like cows did not just like cows did not just like appear.
Cows, pigs,
all of them.
Chickens. Yeah.
They've been here, and it's not like that they themselves, the animals, are bad. It's the way that they're being produced that it's bad. And a lot of vegans are not really looking at the systemic issue. They're not really looking into how exploitative veganism is for labor, for immigrant farm workers, and here in the southern U.S. and in the global South. Like a lot of these vegan products are coming from, and I think it also touches on the question for the forest fires. It comes from really like the global South. So like all of these agribusinesses that are making animal products here in the States are also doing businesses in the global South. They're producing soybean, corn, all of these things that are important for vegan products. And they're all being exported, and they're still causing deforestation. They're still having all these social problems, but that doesn't seem to click for a lot of vegans. And it's becoming problematic because I saw an interview where a vegan was comparing animal slavery to Black slavery and to human slavery. And I was like,
I'm just face palming so hard
right
now.
I was upheld. And he was a white person, and it was a brown person trying to hold him accountable, and like this reporter, and he kept saying like, no, like it's like if you like animal animal slavery is the same thing as human slavery. And it's just like, no, it's not. It's like you're literally like dismissing like a lot of social issues that are like Black folks currently deal with, and they're just perpetuating this. So I feel like to me that's so problematic. And another reason why I was just like, I can't be a vegan. Like I can't really align with these kind of perspectives. I used to be a PETA fan. I'm not anymore.
I think so. I've never gone vegan, which I don't think it would be very hard for me having a very Korean based diet. Yeah. Because a lot of our stock for soups, it has anchovies. Yeah. Or beef broth or like whatever it is. And then when we go out to eat, meat is pretty central because you put it on the grill like Korean barbecue, and everyone's eating that. That being said, a lot of our food is also vegetables. Like we have a ton of vegetables. Yeah. So I feel like plant-based is probably appropriate for how I eat right now because, like Diana, I don't cook meat for myself or anything, but I'm not opposed to eating meat. Right. So I feel like, so I've never gone vegan, right? So I just know that there seems to be a lot of contention among different vegan communities, depending on what your views are on that. But I did have a frustration with the whole Amazon fires going on because a lot of people had different things to say about what the solution to something like this would be. And one of those solutions was for people to go vegan. And that did not click right in my brain because I was like, I don't understand how... Like, I understand how that maybe less meat consumption in general, compounded with a lot of other things together, can prevent something like this. But I don't know how going vegan alone can really be the solution to the world's environmental issues.
So I feel like through grad school, I've also learned to do a lot of sort of self-reflecting. I used to also think like one of my first college and papers in grad school was to how veganism can basically revert climate change. So I was in that stand. But after learning of the really like intricate things of what caused the fires, it really has to do with so many other things. It's like a huge topic. Yeah. So very deep. Let's get into it. So veganism, it could definitely. So I think we should start with like what happened in the forest fires in the Amazon. So the forest fires happened because Bolsonaro, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with, he's a new president of Brazil, a right wing, fascist, racist, anti-indigenous, fantastic human. Yeah. The best of the best. And he basically lifted a lot of restrictions for policy restrictions on indigenous land for agribusinesses. So because of these policies were lifted, ranchers were able to just go into indigenous territories and start deforesting to make space for cattle ranching. So not just cattle ranching, but also crop manufacturing. So the way that a lot of ranchers clear land for agricultural purposes is that they set the forest on fire and like they control it, and then they basically burn the forest down, and then like that's how they clear the land to make space for animal agriculture. So yes, not eating meat will definitely reduce the chances of that happening. But that's just looking at meat. Then we have to look into how that these forests, like the meat is not the only product being produced in these agricultural lands. There's corn, there's soy, there is sugar and coffee. Sugar and coffee are the two main monocrops produced in Brazil. So it's not even meat or pork. And it's also interesting because the soy and the other corn products, they're not being produced to feed the people per se. Those are purposely produced to feed the cattle in the area. So that's why we produce enough food, but most of it is not going to humans, it's going to cattle, to make them, make them grow and like produce more. But they're also being transported to the global north, to agricultural markets here in the States, which imports a lot of their seed and products and produce from Brazil. So then that's looking at how cattle and that happens. But then you also have to think about who is consuming this meat that's being produced in Brazil. It's not the people in the global south. People, because their food is not being, like, they're not even being allowed to touch it. So when you tell someone that lowering their meat intake will reduce climate change, you have to be specific as to who that is. Because, per se, if you tell me lowering my meat intake will lower climate change, as someone that lives in the US and in the global north, yes, my personal reduction of meat intake will reduce meat production in the global south because you're being directly produced to me. However, when you look at where most of this meat is being consumed, you're looking at Europe and all these privileged people, you know? So it's like how, like, you need to, all right, let me just like try to get my thought process. So if you tell, for example, if like somebody in the global north, if we reduce our meat intake drastically, it would definitely like assist in like reducing meat production. But but that's not gonna reduce the production of soybeans. That's not gonna reduce the production of coffee. That's not gonna reduce the production of sugar, which is a heavier industry in Brazil as opposed to meat. So meat could reduce, like, you stop eating, like, if we reduce our meat consumption, yeah, we could reduce a little bit of greenhouse gas emissions, but it won't really solve the systemic issue of agribusinesses, which is at the core of what is truly happening. And the forest fires are not just happening in Amazon, they're happening currently in Indonesia because of palm oil production. They're happening in Australia for cattle production. They're happening in Africa for, I forget what product, or monocrop is mostly sourced from there. But all of these fires are happening in the global south and in places where agribusinesses have really like monopolized on agriculture. However, and those agribusinesses are funneled, like they're funded by us because we are the ones that eat from it.
Yeah.
But again, I think and that's why I want to like start figuring out how to like create more of these localized food systems, because that way we're no longer, like, for example, here in the global north, if we were to have more local food systems, we will no longer depend on external products from the global south. And then that way we can also assist folks in the global south that are being disenfranchised from farming to really have like some sort of power politically to say like, hey, like, we're in the global north, we're not supporting industrial agriculture anymore, now we're supporting local farmers in the global south. Like, how can we do that? You know, like, it's like about building that type of solidarity between just different local communities and small communities across boundaries. I'm trying to think of what else was related to the forest fires. I mean, it was a really dreadful experience. I was crying. Like, I will be honest, I was crying. I was in Ecuador. It was not a good time. Given that like I had just visited the Amazon so recently, and I was just like, why? Like, this gem of an ecosystem, and it's happening. So I think like there's a lot of geopolitical factors that have to play in the role. The IMF plays a big role in this, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization. So when we're looking at like, let's stop the forest fires, let's look at those three, you know? It's not, we can't blame it on people that all they have. If you're low wealth and you only have access to eating meat, that's all you're gonna eat. Like, you can't just be like, okay, I'm not gonna eat meat anymore, and like, what can you eat? There's nothing else you can eat because you don't have access to it. So I think it's really important to look at the systemic issue, not just like how each of us are like individually adding to it, but like really pushing again for our elected officials to really hold these agribusinesses accountable for what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's heavy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the glimmer of hope is that there's food sovereignty. Food sovereignty. There's indigenous peoples that are really like fighting to revitalize their ancestral knowledge and like ancestral practices. And somebody actually we talked about in my sustainable business model class last week on how my professor was kind of confused because she was like, I don't know, like they're telling like the solutions for climate change, they're telling us that we have to go back to like living how we used to live before, which was sustainable before industrial agriculture, but like how can we do that given the technology? And I like just asked, just like, it's not about really like, it's not about going back and living under a cave again, you know? It's not about like I think even there's nothing wrong with it. All like if you want to go live in a cave, live in a cave, go for it. But I think it's not about really going back to that, but like revitalizing or reviving those practices that we used to have, and like bring them back into what we are. And a young indigenous person, I forgot her name, she was speaking at COP25, in which she said that the for the future, what it needs is to have a combination of traditional knowledge and technology, and how those two can be harnessed for the good of, rather than for, evil practices. And I thought that was really interesting to me, because I've also been struggling with that, and like, how do we bring back these ancestral practices in our current like modern society? And I think it's possible. It's just it starts with bringing indigenous peoples into the table, and even going even further than that, giving indigenous peoples their land back, and having them work the land that they have known to work for so long, and us follow their leadership. Because I feel like for too long we've been like trying to like push for solutions that we think are the best ones, and without really looking, and especially for climate change, like the solutions already exist to solve all the problems that we have in the world. And that's the most upsetting thing that I've had to accept, is that these solutions are already in place, and it's because of the geopolitical aspects of how the geopolitical aspects in industrial food production and the energy sector and the economy sector are just perpetrating this. Told you it was deep.
It's always politics. Always comes back to politics.
Yeah.
It always comes back to politics.
And
it's power, right?
Yeah, but I think that's where we have to come in and build that community power, and like build that like localized energy to like really have like a foundation that can counter that. Because at the end of the day, these political decisions, they're working because we're allowing it to. First of all, nobody's saying anything against it. We're not protesting. We're not doing anything. And also because we don't like if they keep receiving our money, they keep receiving our consumption patterns. So like we keep telling them, continue. It's okay. So in a way, us really like stopping like our consumption patterns could assist into like a reduction of like a more of awareness. Is like, people are like, there was an article that I read that people were having less children, millennials, for example, us. And it was due to like not being able to afford childcare. And I thought that was so crazy to me. It's just like, how is it that such a thing as having a child is such a systemic issue? Like, it's become such a problem, and it has to do with health, and it has to do with politics.
Yeah.
So I guess let's try and close off with some practical steps that people can take now that we've brought this doom over people. But just us as an individual, right? And then this is with the caveat of knowing not everyone can do something, like we're limited with the capacities that we're given, right? And so if I don't have a lot of income to go and get sustainable food options or the transportation, whatever, like understanding that. But what are some good practical steps that people can take to impact that change and take on more sustainable choices and be more conscious of the system that we may be putting our dollars towards, so that we can not contribute to these whole big hegemonic conglomerate of strong, powerful people living people's lives.
So individually, for folks that don't have the economic access to sustainable food, I would say if you are of a background of, if your background is from somebody from the global south, or like somebody, like if your family comes from like a lineage of farmers, so like they've some sort of agriculture in your family, which usually there is for like POCs, try to like and get in touch back with that, and like get in touch is just like, how is it that my parents used to survive with their food when they were younger, and like how can I do that now? Because I've also be doing that. I learned that my parents were actually plant-based for most of their childhood. And they grew up fine. They had all these like protein, but just from like local foods that they knew. So they've kept those traditions with them. So like I've also like learn those traditions. And I think eating organic is really important. It's healthier for you. But if you don't have the access to it, I would say like try to like have like eat the foods that are less impactful, like vegetables. Like even if you have to buy them in a supermarket, they're still better than meat produced at the supermarket. And even though supermarkets are they're not the perfect place to go get food, if you don't have anywhere else to go, I would still suggest to go for the vegetables. If you have access to a farmer's market, I would go to a farmer's market. There's a lot more popping up now. And usually food is, especially it depends on what part of the country you are, because if you're in the north, during the winter, it's really hard to come across farmers markets. But during the summer, there's a lot more options. I would say look into how you can get access to that through the internet or through like a local food community. Also look into CSA, which is Community Supported Agriculture. They have a bunch of CSA programs in New York City, Diana, if you're interested. Basically, community supported agriculture, it's a cooperative model that you pay like a certain amount. I think it's per month, and you get healthy food delivered from farmers that are like rural farmers, and it gets brought into the city, and then you get like a box of like healthy vegetables a week, or like for the week, like rations.
Yeah.
And it's really like, that's a really good way. Like a lot of my friends,
super cool.
Yeah, a lot of my friends do that. Like they have like their food ration from like CSAs. I think in regards to access, that will be like my suggestions. Just like do your research. It will be hard, I would say, especially for folks that don't have the economic ability to get to that food. But I would say like not to be discouraged by that, and try to still practice some sort of like healthier diet, because it's not just healthier for the planet, it's really healthy for you. Like meat-centric diets are they're very unhealthy for people's, especially if you eat in the US, because if meat produced here is not well produced. Like if you eat meat here and you compare it to eating meat in a different country, it's totally different.
Yeah.
And I think like the one thing that's really important is to uplift the voices of the movements that are really doing the work for this. So even like, for example, here in the US, there is like this in upstate New York, we have this farm called Soul Fire Farm. It's a Black and brown owned farm. They do agroecological practices. Agroecology is a part of food sovereignty, and their focus is into revitalizing the land by focusing on Black and brown folks. And it's so cool. I went and volunteered for them for one day. I had the most amazing experience with them, and I recommend just supporting like organizations like that, movements like that. Like even if it's just like $1 a month, or if you can like give like a shout out on your stories or through an Instagram post, like sharing knowledge of these systems, I think it will also increase like your accessibility to it.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah. And just try to like support each other, build that community around food.
Yes.
Food is good. I mean, it's delicious too.
And that's the episode. Thank you so much, Christian, for talking with us. As a reminder, you can reach him at De La Tierra Soy, DeLatierraSoy, on Instagram.
And we have the transcript and all the resources discussed in this episode up on the website.
As a reminder, if you have any questions, you can always reach us at globalcaveat@gmail.com or on Instagram or Twitter at globalcaveat.
And a big thank you to all of our listeners and supporters for helping this podcast run. And a special thanks to Cordell Glass for producing our music. Thanks for listening.